So, guys, with Cowboys training camp finally about to begin, the competition for the final 53-man roster is officially heating up. Every year, there are a few difficult decisions, but this time the battle feels even tougher because there are several talented players fighting for only a handful of spots. And now, just days before camp, ESPN's Cowboys insider Todd Archer released his first 53-man roster projection. And it included some decisions that actually changed my point of view how I look into this roster. A few recognizable names were surprisingly left off the roster, raising some big questions about who actually has a secure spot heading into camp. So, let me break down ESPN's shocking projection, why these players were left off, and whether these predictions could actually become reality. What's up, Cowboys Nation? Welcome to the NFL Playbook Cowboys. If you're new here, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. So, Todd Archer just dropped his first 53-man roster projection for the Cowboys, and honestly, a few of these calls caught me off guard. I want to walk you through exactly who got left off, why Archer made these decisions, and whether I actually agree with him. This is one of those projections where the names on the outside looking in tell you just as much as the ones who made the cut, so stick with me through all of it. Because we've got quarterbacks, running backs, the secondary, the pass rush, and the offensive line all in play here. So, let's start with the biggest name on this list. Biggest surprise is Joe Milton did not make the 53-man roster in Archer's projection. Instead, he's got the Cowboys keeping just two quarterbacks, Dak Prescott and Sam Howell, and leaving Milton off the active 53 entirely. Now, Archer actually explained his thinking here, and it makes sense once you hear it. He said he considered going with three quarterbacks and keeping Milton around, but he ultimately talked himself out of it. Why? Because the Cowboys guaranteed Howell $2 million in free agency this offseason, and you don't just let that kind of financial commitment walk out the door for nothing. Archer's reasoning is that Howell simply has more experience and more command of the offense right now, and Milton is still young enough that he could keep developing on the practice squad if he clears waivers. I mean, look, I get it. Let's be honest about Milton's tape so far. He came out of a Tennessee offense that, and I've said this before, does not prepare a quarterback for life in the NFL at all. That's just been true for a long time. He flashed some real arm talent in that one game with the Patriots back in 2024, showed off the mobility and the strength, but ever since then, the results just haven't been there. Even in these preseason reps we've gotten, it hasn't been pretty. If you're grading him purely off what he's shown on the field lately, it's been a real disappointment, honestly. And look, I remember exactly how excited we all were when the Cowboys first traded for this guy. The whole thing, the arm talent, the athleticism, it's a legit package. But you never quite know what you're going to get from him on any given snap. Some of us have wondered out loud if his long-term future in this league is actually at tight end instead of quarterback. Either way, he is on the hot seat this summer, no doubt about it. And I think that's really what this whole quarterback situation comes down to. That alone tells you where the front office's confidence level sits right now. It doesn't mean Milton's career in Dallas is over practice. Squad eligibility gives him a real path to stick around and keep developing without wasting a roster spot. But it does mean the clock is ticking louder than it was a year ago. Training camp reps and these preseason games are going to matter enormously for how this actually plays out. So, I want to know, do you think Joe Milton makes this roster or not? Drop a yes or no in the comments. Okay, now let's shift over to the backfield, because Malik Davis is the next name that stands out on this list. Archer's explanation here was that the Cowboys made room instead for Phil Maffa, since he's got some real upside, and for Jaden Blue, who they still want to evaluate. Archer basically called Davis the forgotten man in this whole running back conversation, and honestly, I think that's a fair way to put it. But here's the thing, I'm not ready to forget about him. Think about the story here for a second. This guy got cut, the Cowboys drafted two running backs that same offseason, and then injuries hit in August, and they called him back in to help out. And he was so good in that role that he earned an actual roster spot, and then he earned the RB2 job outright. Maybe part of that was because the other options just weren't ready yet, I'll give you that. He doesn't have the same ceiling that some of these younger backs have. I'm not going to pretend otherwise, but I do think he's getting overlooked right now. He helps this team on special teams too, which matters a lot in these roster battles. Now, if Hunter Luepke ends up taking over that personal protector role on punts, maybe that's how Davis gets squeezed out. But I don't think we should be writing him off as easily as some people are. He's fighting to make this team sure, but he was the guy who held down that RB2 job all last season. It really comes down to how much the coaching staff wants to see what the newer backs can do versus just going with the guy they already know works. And honestly, that's a fair debate to have. Coaches love upside, and both Maffa and Blue clearly have more of it long-term than Davis does at this stage of his career. But roster building isn't only about upside, it's about who you can trust when the lights come on in September, and Davis has already proven that under real pressure once. I don't think he should be counted out of making this 53, and I wouldn't be shocked at all if he's still wearing a Cowboys uniform come week 1. Moving over to the secondary now, Marquise Bell is another name that got left off this projection, and this one's a little more complicated. I don't think he was ever a total lock, so this isn't as shocking as the quarterback situation. Some of that same financial logic that applied to Howell kind of applies here too. Bell played some safety last year, and I don't get the sense that this new coaching staff, especially defensive coordinator Christian Parker, fully loves what they've gotten out of him so far. He had a really strong stretch back in 2023, playing almost like an undersized dime linebacker. But that also came back to bite the team a bit because of the size and run support issues that come with playing him there. He's kind of become a player without a clearly defined position at this point, and I'm curious how Parker actually plans to use him if he does make the roster. Now, the money angle here is interesting too. Bell's cap number is pretty cheap, sitting right around $2.83 million, but since we're past June 1st, there's actually zero in cap savings if they cut him. Dallas would save about $2 million in cash that isn't guaranteed, so there's some cash relief there if they went that direction. The dead money on the cap comes out to around $3.67 million, with part of that spreading into next year's number, which is why the savings look different than you'd expect. Still, I think Bell has a real shot to earn a roster spot, but he's going to have to fight for it. There's legitimate competition pushing him, guys like Julius Wood trying to carve out a role in that same safety room too. And Archer did note that the Cowboys kept an extra cornerback in Darion Kendrick in this projection, so depending on how you're counting things, and depending on where rookie safety Caleb Downs factors in, that might be the real difference between Bell making this team or not. So, tell me, are you keeping Marquise Bell or cutting him? Let me know down below. Next up, let's talk pass rush, because James Houston getting left off this projection is worth mentioning, even if it's not the biggest shock on the list. Here's what stands out. Houston actually finished second on this entire team in sacks last season with 5.5, and he still got left out of Archer's final count. Meanwhile, Maurice Lufau made this projection, and Archer gave him real credit for how he's transitioned to playing on the edge while still being able to drop into coverage. Then Tyrus Wheat grabbed that final rotational spot, mostly because of what he brings on special teams, which honestly, I've said before, don't sleep on that value. It's real. Houston's story is one we've seen play out across the league plenty of times. His actual production is better than how the league seems to view him. Remember, this guy had 8 sacks back in 2022 with the Lions as an undrafted free agent, and he still couldn't stick on that roster afterward. That tells you something about how teams evaluate the full picture beyond just the sack total. He's not viewed as a strong run defender, and there are real questions about what he offers on special teams. But would anybody actually be upset if James Houston made this roster? I wouldn't be. I'd love to see the Cowboys find a spot for him somewhere in that 5th or 6th edge rusher role. Archer's group had Tyrus Wheat at 6, LeFaux at 5, Sam Williams at 4, and then Rashawn Gary, Donovan Ezeruwaku, and rookie first-rounder Malachi Lawrence rounding out the top of that group. I still think there's a path to keeping Houston around if the roster shakes out right. So who's the player you'd actually cut to make room? We will see within few days. Now, let's flip over to the offensive line now, because Ajani Cornelius is the last major surprise cut on this list. Archer only carried 9 offensive linemen in his projection, and that just didn't leave room for last year's 6th-round pick. He barely played as a rookie, mostly just some special team snaps, coming out of Oregon as a developmental right tackle type. And you know how this team operates. They like holding on to their own draft picks as long as they possibly can. Archer even wrote that a strong training camp could change this outlook entirely and get Cornelius onto the roster. Then look at the tackle depth here. You've got Nate Thomas, you've got Drew Shelton. That's already 4 tackles when you add in Tyler Guyton and Terrence Steele. Would the Cowboys actually carry 5 tackles? Maybe, especially since Thomas does offer some guard flexibility too. But here's my honest take. If the coaching staff believes Cornelius is a good player, they're going to find a way to keep him around. You just don't casually let go of a promising young offensive lineman in this league. There simply aren't enough good ones to go around. A few other names worth mentioning quickly before we wrap up. Luke Schoonmaker did make this projection, but Jonathan Mingo did not, and honestly, I think that one's close to becoming reality either way given the crowded receiver room. Trayshawn Holden and tight end Michael Trigg, a couple of fan favorites, also missed the cut here, which stings a little if you've been rooting for those guys to break through. Jay Toya is right on the outside, looking in up front on the defensive line. And on defense, Josh Butler, along with Trikweze Bridges and Zion Childress, also didn't make Archer's final 53, even though all three have shown flashes in camp settings before. So that's ESPN's full breakdown of surprise cuts heading into camp. But remember, these first projections almost never end up exactly right. Somebody always fights their way in during camp, and somebody who looked locked in gets squeezed out. Training camp will settle all of this. Let me know which prediction you think is wrong. Drop your own 53 in the comments, and I'll see you in the next one.